Danbi is a high school senior in her last year, only a few days away from her university entrance exams. But math has always been her biggest struggle, no matter how hard she tries. She ends up dozing off in class, which drives her teacher crazy. One day, he finally calls her to the board, hoping she'll prove herself, but she freezes and can't solve a thing. Disappointed, the teacher scolds her in front of everyone. Later that day, Danbi heads home and avoids studying altogether, choosing instead to scroll through her phone and listen to music, while her mom watches her in frustration, wondering when she'll finally get serious about her future. Her mom teases her, saying that if she put the same effort into math that she does into memorizing song lyrics, she'd already be a genius. She jokes that Danbi probably got her math struggles from her dad, who wasn't any better at it, and warns that no university will take her if things don't change. What really gets on Danbi's nerves is when her mom switches the TV to one of her endless historical dramas. Tired of hearing the same lecture, Danbi heads out to her best friend's place, where her friend reminds her that this is her last chance to make it into college. If she messes up this time, her future could slip away. With nowhere else to turn, the next morning Danbi oversleeps and dashes out of the house. Already running late for her big exam, her mom calls after her with words of encouragement, telling her to do her best so she can get into a good university. Anxiety builds in Danbi's chest, especially when she thinks about the math section. She tries to study a little more on the bus, flipping through her notes as fast as she can. When she gets off, she takes off running toward the exam hall, only to realize she's left her umbrella behind. As she gets closer, dread starts to creep in. She can feel herself falling apart inside, convinced she isn't ready. Panic takes over, and for a moment she seriously considers turning back instead of facing the possibility of failing. Danbi sits beneath the pouring rain, her heart heavy as she quietly wishes she could just disappear. A small puddle shimmers in front of her, rippling with each drop that falls. She steps toward it, and in that moment, something unbelievable happens. She sees a crowd of people dressed in strange, old-fashioned clothing, gathered together and praying desperately for rain. They cry out that it hasn't rained in 3 years and that the drought is killing them. Before Danbi can react, she suddenly loses her balance and tumbles into the puddle. The cold water pulls her under, and she feels herself drowning, but instead of dying, she bursts back to the surface, finding herself in the same spot. Only now, the world around her is completely different. In another world, she looks around in confusion, asking the people nearby if they're shooting a historical drama or something. The king notices her strange behavior and, terrified, shouts, demanding to know if she's a demon. Flustered, she blurts out, "No, I'm just a high school student," but to them, her words sound like a powerful spell. Their fear only grows. Suddenly, guards rush in with swords drawn. Realizing the weapons are real, she panics and quickly makes something up, saying, "I understand why I'm here. Please, God, bring the rain." The people start echoing her words as if they were a sacred prayer. But when they look up, she's disappeared. She had already fled, running until she came across a chamber filled with ceremonial garments. Quickly, she puts on a priest's robe and slips into a meeting with the king. During the gathering, the king boldly declares that the kingdom must abandon old superstitions and embrace science and mathematics to find real solutions to their problems. However, the chief priest rises in opposition, warning that such thinking could bring great danger. The chief priest dismisses the king's ideas as nonsense, claiming that mathematics is just another kind of superstition and that no one can truly understand nature through numbers or equations. He insists the drought is a sign of the heavens' anger toward the king, and that the only way to bring back the rain is for the king to perform a sacred ritual with the queen. Danbi quietly sneaks out of the meeting to search for her phone, but she's quickly discovered and captured again. As she waits for the king to appear, she starts to think that maybe she could use the rain as a chance to escape, but then the king stuns her by revealing that it hasn't rained in 3 years. The king immediately takes a dislike to her and orders her execution without hesitation. Frightened, she cries out, "Please, wait, I'm just a student from the future. I ended up here by mistake." She desperately tries to convince him that she knows a great deal about history, and when that doesn't seem to help, she quickly adds that she's also exceptionally good at math. Intrigued by her claim, the king pauses the execution and tells her to prove it. He presents her with a problem based on the Pythagorean theorem. At first, she's completely baffled and admits she can't even understand the writing, but then she realizes what it actually is. Once she realizes it's the Pythagorean theorem, she solves it effortlessly. Leaving the king in awe, he admits that his royal scholars usually need 3 days to find the answer. From then on, everyone starts calling Danbi Gosam. Believing she's a brilliant male scholar, impressed by her abilities, the king gives her a special task: to teach mathematics to the people. and promises that if she succeeds, he'll help her return home. He insists on being her first student, but to her shock, she discovers that he can't even count. Patiently, she starts from the very beginning, teaching him numbers, addition, and subtraction, before moving on to multiplication. Over time, they begin preparing. They get ready for a math contest against a rival city's top scholar. With the threat of punishment if Danbi loses, she boldly corrects the king during practice, even slapping him in frustration when he makes mistakes. The guards rush in, ready to punish her for touching him, but the king stops them and laughs it off. They hide all the math papers whenever the queen visits, pretending to be practicing music instead. One day, the king notices that Danbi is starving and invites her to eat with him, but she dislikes the food and takes him to the kitchen, where, using ingredients from her bag, she prepares a delicious meal for him. She prepares instant noodles for him, and he loves them, even though they're spicy. When she offers water, he refuses, insisting he enjoys the heat. The next morning, the entire palace hears him screaming, and when Danbi checks on him, she sees he's wearing a protective talisman on his ear. Convinced she has cursed him, she rolls her eyes and says, "Relax, superstar. It was just noodles, not black magic. There's no spell involved. The chili just upset his stomach." When she explains this, he asks, "What's a stomach anyway?" So Danbi patiently sits down and teaches him what a stomach is, what intestines are, and even about the heart, and how if he places his hand on his chest, he can feel it beating. But he said, "I don't feel anything." She smiled and replied, "It's okay. One day, when you're with someone you love, you'll feel it for yourself." He was amazed by how much she knew. He began to see her as a brilliant scholar, so he asked her to teach all the royal scholars of Joseon, not only math, but everything from science to agriculture. That night, he offered her a tangerine, and she casually responded, "Thanks," she said casually, but he quickly grew upset. "You're a Joseon wanderer. You should have saved that fruit for at least 3 days. You don't value your blessings." She laughed and said, "It's just a tangerine. Don't be so dramatic." Later, they went out to play ball in the palace courtyard, and she got him to run for the first time in years. The next day, the king spoke with his future bride, telling her that he would receive a magical love potion in his stew that night, and they would be married immediately afterward. But fate had other plans. The bowl ended up in Danbi's hands. She began acting oddly and soon fell asleep in the palace. When she awoke, she kept apologizing to the king, but he waved it off, saying nothing had happened and she should move on. They went for a walk in the palace gardens, and he told her that completing her mission could earn her a high position in the council and even a royal horse. She shook her head, saying she wanted nothing and would return to her own world as soon as the rain began. The king nodded and told her that from now on, they were equals, no titles, just man to man. Yet the very next day, disaster arrived. Danbi was captured and accused of insulting the king. She was bound by her limbs as preparations for torture began. But the king stepped forward and convinced the priests that her knowledge was too valuable to waste. One ambitious priest insisted on testing her personally, giving her 2 weeks and declaring that if the rain didn't come by then, she would be executed. Danbi refused to lose hope. She worked tirelessly, calculating and observing, with the palace musician helping her construct a rainfall gauge, and then, suddenly, rain began to fall from the sky. Danbi, joy flooded over her, but the king suddenly recalled her promise to leave once the rain fell. He hurried to her residence and found her weeping before the rain gauge, lost in emotion. He urged her to go at once, explaining that a ship bound for Ming was ready and waiting, but she shook her head, explaining that she had spent her entire life running, and had only arrived here while trying to escape her own world. Just then, the palace musician, who had been secretly collaborating with the priest arrived, having commanded the palace musician to eliminate Danbi, convinced that she might really be from the future. But the musician disagreed, warning that if that were true, she was far too valuable to harm. Instead, he mounted Danbi on a horse and rode hard through the forest until they reached a hidden grove. There, he confessed he had always known she was a girl but assured her that he was trustworthy and her secret was safe. She explained that it had never been intentional, that she had only taken the job because it had been offered to a boy and she had no other choice. While back in the palace, the high priest argued that everything Danbi had taught them must be erased, particularly the new written language she was developing, insisting they uphold tradition and erase the boy's influence. But the king would not hear it. He mounted his horse and rode out to find her. Meanwhile, in the forest, the guards finally caught up to Danbi and the musician. He gave her a chance to flee and held the attackers at bay, battling them fiercely until the queen arrived, her feet raw and bleeding from running all that way, driven by desperation to find them. Danbi kept walking down the road until she came to a crossroads. unsure which way to turn. Then a memory surfaced, something the king had once told her. That the sun was Joseon's clock. Trusting his words, she followed the path of the light until it led her to the sea. There she found the king already waiting, as if he had known she would come. That night they sat together on the shore, watching the stars drift over the waves. She said that in the time she came from the stars were fewer, hidden by the glow of her world. And he answered that the stars had never gone anywhere. It was only people who forgot how to see them. You'll start to notice more, he said. The stars were never gone. They were only waiting for you to open your eyes. The heart chooses what the eyes can see. Silence settled between them. Then the king spoke again. His voice soft but certain. He told her that he loved her, that he wanted to build a new language, one simple enough for every voice to be heard, not just those born to privilege. She felt a rush of memory, reached into her pocket, and found the money she had carried from her own time. His face was there, etched in ink and history, and in that moment she understood that his dream would become real. When he returned to his palace, he carried that dream like a promise to his people. He declared that from that day on, those who served the people with honesty and heart would be given wages, not just praise. The high priest shocked the court by agreeing, saying that anyone who brought light to others should share in its warmth. But when the king asked about Gosam, the hall fell silent. Then erupted in anger. The nobles demanded his exile, some even his death. Still, Danbi kept teaching the king in secret, showing him how to reason, to write, to measure and question. Lessons whispered behind closed doors. One morning, as sunlight spilled through the palace corridors, she stumbled upon the queen hiding behind a silk curtain, eating hurriedly from a small dish. They had forbidden her to eat freely, fearing she would lose her beauty to the softness of real hunger. And in that moment, Danbi saw not a queen, but another soul trapped by the weight of other people's rules. They said the queen must not gain weight or ruin her appearance. So Danbi quietly offered her one of the instant noodle cups she had brought from her own time. The queen accepted, and as they ate together, the distance between them faded. Laughter replaced silence, and from that moment they became unlikely friends. A few days later, the queen went to the king and told him she knew everything. She had already spoken to the queen mother as well, revealing that the girl called Danbi had been chosen to become one of his concubines. Before Danbi could make sense of it, she was surrounded by palace maids, their hands gentle but unyielding as they dressed her in fine silk and painted her face. She sat still, confused and afraid, until she finally understood what they were preparing her for. They had been getting her ready for the king's midday visit, saying she was to be his first, and when it finally sank in, fear surged through her. She broke free and fled down the twisting palace corridors, her silk skirts catching on every corner. The head maid raced to tell the king she had escaped, and he went after her, moving quickly through the halls until he found her, grasped her arm, and pulled her into a quiet chamber. She struggled and cried out that they had promised to remain just friends, that she was barely 19. And the king let out a low, curious laugh, repeating 19 as if it held a secret meaning she couldn't yet grasp. You've had at least 3 years of growing up. You're not a child anymore. I've known you were a young woman for some time. I haven't crossed any lines, but tonight, you need to stay here. Everyone is watching. Don't worry, I won't harm you. The truth is, my mother is incredibly stubborn, and convincing her is nearly impossible. The next morning, Danbi went to talk to the musician. He asked if she was certain about returning to the future, but she stayed silent, torn and filled with doubt. She walked away and sat alone, letting her thoughts settle. The queen arrived and said someone wished to meet her. When Danbi stepped into the palace, she came face to face with the queen mother, who resembled her own mother perfectly. Overwhelmed with emotion, she broke into tears, leaving everyone puzzled by her reaction. That evening, she visited the new star mapping system of Joseon, a project she had helped design, which would allow the kingdom to track days and months with precision. Later, the king invited her to see another creation he had been working on, a project of his own invention. The king had invented a new alphabet with 28 letters to make reading and writing simpler, so that everyone in Joseon, not only the scholars, could learn. As they reached the center of the great hall, he invited her to sit in the ceremonial chair, then placed a royal hairpin on her head as a symbol of marriage and asked her to remain with him forever. Danbi began to cry, saying she couldn't. She had promised to return when the rains came. Her mother was waiting and relying on her. The king replied softly, "Go to her, and then come back." He urged her to stay with him, but she refused again, and in frustration, he admitted that the future was better than their present, full of illness and struggle. Then he left. Heartbroken, she stood frozen in the hall, when suddenly a blow to her head knocked her unconscious. Someone attacked her with a sword and set the building ablaze. When the king heard of the disaster, he braved the flames to rescue her, and the following day, he summoned his assistant. He reported that the ancient manuscript had vanished overnight and accused the high priest of taking it. The king grabbed the priest's hand and demanded if he had no sense of covering his tracks after such a crime. Then he turned to Danbi to confirm if this was the voice she had heard. She nodded, revealing that the book in her bag had protected her from the attack. Furious, the king faced the priest, questioning his motives and reminding him of the significance of what he had done. The priest responded calmly that it was necessary if the new language was to spread. The priest warned that giving young people the ability to think freely would bring chaos and could destroy the kingdom. He admitted he feared not death, but the disorder that might ruin the future. The king replied that no matter the priest's efforts, he would create the writing system for the people. He wanted to help make their dreams possible, asking why they should fear a future they would never witness, a world they could not know. Yet the priest remained unmoved, dropping to his knees and pleading to be punished to stop it. Soon the sky darkened and rain began to fall, gentle at first, as Danbi went. Danbi strolled through the palace one final time, bidding farewell to her friends. The king asked to walk with her to the farthest edge, and they moved together until they reached the shore. There, Danbi stepped into the familiar pond and let herself sink once more, just as she had before. Moments later she surfaced back in her own world. Noticing that only a few seconds had passed, she still had time to make it to the exam, so she sprinted toward the test hall and saw her teacher waiting. The entrance exam was about to begin. The exam had just begun, and she quickly took her seat to start. Later that day, she returned home to find her mother waiting, and ran into her arms, embracing her tightly. Everything about Danbi had changed. Her outlook, her habits, and the way she saw the world had shifted after her journey. She had learned to treasure the people and moments around her more deeply. Months went by, and one afternoon, as she left school, rain began to fall. Suddenly someone held an umbrella over her, and when she looked up, she saw a face she knew all too well. He resembled the king of Joseon, yet he only smiled and reminded her that they had met long time ago on a bus when she had dropped her umbrella. And that was where the story concluded. If you followed it to the end, share your thoughts and don't forget to like, subscribe and share the video. See you next time.